My name is Jean Kim, Presbyterian clergywoman. I live in Seattle, Washington. I was born and raised in a wealthy family up until my age 10 in North Korea. But as soon as the communists came in and took over, we escaped from that regime, seeking freedom in South Korea, and became refugee families in South Korea. After a deadly struggle to survive for 4 years, a Korean War broke out, which took all we owned and the life of my brother. And in immigrant life, I lost one of my 2 sons and became a ever-grieving and pain-stricken mother and a woman. And all these trauma of 40 years in my life, God turned them into motivation to serve the Lord by serving the homeless. I am one of a Presbyterian and Methodist mission product in Korea. I became a Christian through them, and I'm also one of many millions whose lives were saved during Korean War by the sacrifice of UN soldiers who shed their blood for us in Korean War. And it was about my time to share my blessings with those who have none here, suffer in poverty and homelessness. I've been a social worker all my life. I graduated from the Theological Seminary in Korea in 1959, but I was ordained many, many years later in North Puget Sound Presbytery in Washington State. And then I developed Church of Mary Magdalene with homeless women, mentally ill, or substance-addicted population. I worked with that population before as a social worker and mental health counselor at Harvard Community Mental Health Center for many, many years. And although we did a good job in therapy, I noticed spirituality was missing. And as a theology graduate, I knew very well that these people could find the fundamental ground of hope in God. So I developed that unique ministry in Seattle to help homeless women to restore their self-image and pride by restoring the image of God as loving, forgiving, accepting God rather than punishing, negative, and condemning God. We named the church Church of Mary Magdalene because Mary Magdalene is the name of woman in the Bible who was caught by 7 demons. And I wanted to have homeless women to experience freedom from their life struggles and demons and reach to the point where Mary Magdalene arrived, confessing God, finding hope, and experiencing healing. In the United States, approximately 3 million people are homeless. Homelessness for families, especially for women and children, has been rising like a tide and spreading like a contagious disease throughout the nation. And often homelessness for women and children mean assault, robbery, rape, or even murder. And homelessness is crisis for women and children, just like a tornado, fire, hurricane. Although many people don't think that way. Some of the homeless people are working poor, whose earnings are not enough to afford a regular apartment, or there are not enough low-income housings. In 70s, we had a 300,000 surplus of low-income housings, but today we are short by 5 million of those housings. Some of the homeless are domestic violence victims. Women choose the street as an alternative to abusive homes. And some of the homeless are runaway youth who also choose the street rather than abusive homes. 75% of the girls and 50% of the boys turn to prostitution for survival. And they feel so bad about that, they turn to alcohol and drugs, not only to survive, but then to cover up their negative feelings. Some of the homeless are ex-welfare recipient who found a job, but then the job didn't last long. Or they found the job, but then they could not find affordable daycare or transportation. And some of the homeless are mentally ill people, and some of the homeless are substance addicted population. Some people are illiterate or physically disabled, and they cannot work, or their income is not enough to afford regular housings. Some of the homeless are transient people who move around from city to city seeking jobs or seasonal jobs. Or some of the homeless are those who cannot fit into a society. Or some of the homeless are those who have been familiar with homelessness and poverty and didn't experience anything else, and they're stuck in poverty and homelessness. And their poverty is so deep, ditch, like a ditch. I get the message from Old Testament saying that God was a very compassionate God who could sit in the heaven watching human misery, had to come down to deliver people from the misery. For example, God liberated Israel from Egyptian bondage and Babylonian exile. And that compassionate God was siding with the poor and homeless. In New Testament, Jesus is presented as an incarnate of that compassionate God. And Jesus himself walked and sat and ate and talked with and healed the homeless in Galilee downtown. And that image really got me in my early teen years, and I was really attracted to that image, and it took me out to the street. In Korea, before I came to the United States, I worked with the lepers, tuberculosis patients, orphans, and homeless elderly, as if Jesus was working with them in his days, and I wanted to be like a little Jesus. And when I came to the United States, I looked for lepers to work with, as I did in Korea, and there was no leprosy here. And of course, homeless population is like lepers in Korea. They're rejected by a whole society, and they are treated like a different species. And they have no place to live, although God created all human beings in God's own image and blessed equally. And everyone deserves to have a home to be calling their own home, a place to live. My speaking tour came about after Presbyterian Church adopted 2 overtures to end homelessness for women and children as a denominational policy. And soon after that, a women's ministry program area was called to move that into action. I was called to travel around the whole nation to motivate Presbyterians to do something to end the homelessness. I have spoken to 177 groups in 65 cities in 24 states, and I covered about half of the United States of America. And if I want to share what I have observed, what churches doing, of course, churches do a lot, but then 3 different models I have been observed. First model is country club model. That is a very exclusive and self-centered, self-serving, and spiritually focused, otherworldly, and kept a church locked up for the sake of keeping the church clean and safe, and keep all the homeless and poor people away from the church. And second model is give a check model. They do what the first country club model does, but then send the checks to some charity programs. And then the third model is Christ model. They are very opposite from first country club model. They are very inclusive, open, sharing, and not worried about keeping the church door locked. They open one room, many rooms, or whole church to welcome the homeless. While I was traveling throughout the nation, I have sensed that there is a hunger among Presbyterians for a challenge. I think that's the reason overwhelming number of congregations, the presbyteries or individual groups invited me to hear what they don't want to hear about, because my talk has been very tough and very few people will want to hear that except God. I have seen many wonderful programs in the nation, and they can be wonderful models for us to learn from. And some church open up a single room to make it a shelter for the homeless. And some churches open the whole activity wing to make it daycare for the homeless. And some churches open the whole sanctuary to make it a shelter for homeless people, not just a rotating basis, but every night. Some church open up the house that belongs to the church and make it transitional home for the homeless. And some church use parking lot to park a trailer or modular homes on their parking lot and use it as a shelter for the homeless. Some church purchased old rundown building to renovate it into transitional or homeless shelter. And some church gave up a parsonage to make it home for the homeless women and children. Some churches offer job training such as computer training, sewing program, and more toward ending their homelessness for good. Some churches are involved in developing permanent housing. So one room, two rooms, the whole church, whole sanctuary, or even space and parking lot. Some churches are ecumenically doing the same thing. And there is a model successfully working with existing social service agencies and government operating huge home programs. First of all, I'd like to suggest the churches to educate themselves, educate the congregation about the reality of homelessness and root cause of homelessness through the sermons and Bible study and adult education class and Sunday school, and through special forums. Churches are wealthy, owning many rooms, blessed with many rooms. Very few people can answer to the question, how many rooms do you have in your church? And I urge all Presbyterian churches and other churches open at least one room to make it home for the homeless population. And I present 77 ways that room could be useful. Some of the 77 ways are emergency intervention, such as shelters and feeding and so on, and some are prevention, such as eviction prevention program and education job training. Any church says cannot do any one of 77 may go to see a psychiatrist. Opening up one room in the church is possible only when we realize the fact that we don't own the church. Church belongs to Jesus Christ. And we have no right to lock up the rooms and the doors of the church and let God's people sleep outside. I would encourage our churches to be involved more deeply in building low-income housings by renting or purchasing apartments, single apartments or trailers and modular homes or domes and apartment buildings and so on. Churches need to be a prophetic voice. Some people told me that it's a church's job, we gotta do more. Yes, you're right, we gotta do more. And some people tell me that it's a government job, it's not a church's job. Churches cannot do social work. That's right, it's a government job. Churches cannot, end the homelessness alone. And I want to suggest us to speak to government to establish political will and policy to end the homelessness. And then use more of our tax money to develop a comprehensive emotional, physical, and life skill rehabilitation program so that we help people to move out of poverty and welfare into independence. I've been writing my own handouts for my audiences, and that handout became a book, a manual I call, and that manual includes many concrete steps for churches to take to end homelessness, and that manual also includes hundreds of model programs I have visited in the nation. And I appreciate very much the Hunger Ministry is publishing that manual to be a resource for Presbyterian Church. I developed the homeless T-shirts in purple color. Purple color is color of Lent in Christian tradition to grieve, lament, and repent for having so many homeless in this country. And we also want to stand in solidarity with the homeless and commit our loyalty and commit our conviction to end homelessness. I proudly wore this homeless shirts. I wear anywhere these shirts, even when I was invited by the state of Washington House of Representatives to give invocation. This is my identity, and I will wear it all the time, maybe in my casket also. Let me share with you a story I heard in Florida. One day, Jesus was walking by a church. A homeless woman sitting outside the church and crying. Jesus asked, "Why are you crying, sister?" She replied, "This church will not let me in because I'm dirty and smelling homeless." Jesus told her, "Don't worry, sister, they won't let me in either." My challenging question is, where is Jesus? Is he inside the church or outside the church? Did we lock him out of our church? 이제 점점 조금씩 몇 개의 한국 교회들이, 몇 명의 한국 교포들이 이 무숙자 문제, 빈곤, 가난 문제에 대해서 이제 눈을 뜨기 시작하는 것을 보고 저는 퍽 기쁘게 생각합니다. 우리들은 너무너무 개인 축복에만 급급하고 개인 구원에만 급급하고 우리 코 밑에서 죽어가는 배고픈 헐벗은 사람들에 대해서 무관심합니다. 우리는 얼마나 많은 축복을 받아야 만족하겠으며 이제는 그만 축복 달라는 기도 그만하고 지금까지 받은 축복을 이 나라에 놨으면서도 헐벗고 굶주리고 집 없는 사람들과 나눠야 된다고 생각합니다. 미국은 우리를 받아들여서 우리에게 이렇게 따뜻한 가정들을 허락하시고 여기에 뿌리를 내리고 살도록 해줬는데 우리는 이 나라에 나서 정말 집 없는 사람들에게 우리의 축복과 사랑을 나눠야 된다고 생각합니다.